30 is this strange threshold that you cross where you don't feel old, but you also don't feel so young. People in their 40s and 50s will tell you that they wish that they could be your age again, and that you still have your whole life ahead of you. And that makes you feel kind of young. But hangovers start lasting a lot longer, and every now and then you start to notice random little creaks and aches in your knees and back that hint at the idea that your body is just not as young as it used to be. And lastly, hanging around a bunch of 20-somethings can make you feel like the grandparent at any party. That is, if you can even stand hanging around a bunch of 20-somethings to begin with. Jokes aside, your 30s is a really interesting time in life, and I want to share with you what I think might be the biggest and single most profound difference between your 20s and your 30s. At least it was for me. For many of us, a good portion of our 20s is or was spent in college. This is what life was like for me as well, but even if college is not in your life, I think the lesson is still the same. You see, when you're in college at this age, everyone around you is idealistic, working towards a similar goal, and feels like they're on a pretty straightforward path to setting up their dream life and making an impact on the world. As a business major, I learned the importance of networking with other people in a suit and tie, projecting confidence, looking as put together as possible, and presenting the best version of myself to the people that I met. I joined a public speaking club and learned to give speeches in front of an audience. And I learned how to approach the professional speakers that came to speak in our lecture halls and show them just how bright and aspirational I was. I had high hopes of becoming successful, but other than the things that perhaps modern society usually considers success, I had only a vague idea of what success actually meant to me. And back home, my family was mostly assured that I was on the right track in life simply because I was in college. Something that seemed like a guarantee to success in life. In my social life, this was the first time I started to get dressed up and go to clubs, bar hopping downtown, or taking trips to Vegas, where your aspirations were to eventually be able to show up with a nicer watch, a nicer car, or pay for bottle service. You didn't really care so much about where you were going, how late you'd be out, or how your body actually felt that night and the day after, so long as you could get a little drunk and you had that social atmosphere around you. And so basically, in your 20s, as long as you looked like you had your life together, you felt like you had your life together. And that was all the affirmation that you needed to satisfy yourself and everyone else and to move forward with optimism. And here's where the main reflection comes in. Looking back, I think our 20s is mostly about what I'll simply call the external. External validation, external motivation, external joys and satisfaction. And don't get me wrong, this is a very valuable time in your life because it helps you to build confidence in yourself within your external world. But as I alluded to before, I think it's often just wrapped up around idealism, appearance, caring about what others think of you, and doing all of the things that you think that you should be doing in order to become successful. But as I'm about to explain, all of this neglects what I think might be the most fundamental aspect of becoming a more conscious human being. Here's the transition period. By the time that I entered my early 30s, I was out of college, had spent a bit more time working the retail job that got me through school, then a year or two trying my hand at being a cool entrepreneur with a photography and photo booth business, before coming across a quote-unquote real job in the real estate industry that not only promised to set me up with a career, but was actually an opportunity in which I was specifically brought in to learn directly from the owner of the company and eventually take over the entire business. Now, you may have a different career situation than I did, but the thing that we may have in common is that at this age, many of us think that we have this upwards trajectory set for the rest of our lives. But after grinding away at that path for a few years, perhaps working 10 to 12-hour days and weekends, going through the struggles of trying to gain competency in a new field, and a ton of internal debate, we start questioning if this is the work that we really want to be doing, if our college degree is in something that we actually care about, or if we chose it simply because it was in a lucrative industry. And if life would actually be more fulfilling if we did something completely different and a lot more interesting, even if it was for a lot less money. For me, although this opportunity held the promise of a six-figure income, and having an established property management business literally handed over to me, I eventually made the very difficult decision to let it go after having somewhat of a quarter-life crisis and facing the harsh reality that no amount of money or career aspirations can compensate for doing something that just isn't in alignment with who we really are and how we want to be spending the majority of our waking hours. Let me repeat that again. No amount of money or career aspirations can compensate for doing something that is just not in alignment with who we really are or how we want to be spending the majority of our waking hours. Now, another huge part of your 30s where things start to shift is romantic relationships. Like it or not, we pretty much all face some kind of pressure to get it right during this time. Women often start contemplating the ever-changing information around their biological clock, and even those that are non-traditional and independent usually start receiving some pressure from people in their family to start choosing their dating partners wisely. As a man, if you get brought along to family functions, you might get this vibe that people are secretly analyzing you to see if you have what it takes to be the one, or if you're going to end up breaking her heart and leaving her scrambling to find someone else. I mean, after all, you two are getting to the age where you should be having kids soon, right? For me, at 33, I found myself in a very meaningful and loving relationship. And in many ways, I thought that I could see myself with this person for the rest of our lives. But there were also a lot of very high highs and very low lows because we were beautifully aligned in some ways, but painfully misaligned in others. We tried so hard to understand which challenges in our relationship were due to our own personal triggers and traumas, things that we could and should work on within ourselves and within the relationship, and which were signs that we were simply incompatible, and that trying to compromise to make everything peaceful would actually just result in abandoning ourselves in some way. When I'd bring these things up with my family, they'd often just say that uncertainty and challenge is part of every relationship, without actually trying to understand the uniqueness and nuance of the specific situation and each individual person. And so there can almost be this feeling of guilt if you're in a relationship in your 30s and asking yourself these kinds of questions. And being in your 30s can make you feel like you have a lot less time to find the answers. And so here's what I think might be the biggest difference between being in your 30s and your 20s. In your 30s, you start realizing that you've been living your life largely according to external pressures and external ideas of what life should be, but that all of those suggestions from the external world didn't actually take into account who you truly are as a unique individual. And so you finally start shifting your focus inwards in order to uncover the truth about yourself. Instead of simply trotting through life, doing the things that you've been told you're supposed to do, you start waking up and asking yourself the deeper questions like, am I making my life choices based out of love and excitement for life, or out of the fear of uncertainty and consequences? Where did my ideas of what I should be doing or how I should be actually come from? Did they come from me and my own insights, or did they come from other people? In what ways am I a challenging person to live with? Are those traits necessary to who I am, or are they habits and patterns that don't actually serve me? Do the people around me want to see me become the best version of myself in all of my uniqueness, or do they want to see the best version of me as they imagine it for themselves? How would I spend my time if I knew I'd only be alive for another 20 years, 10 years, 3 years, or 12 months? How do I show up when things are tough and I'm stressed, sad, or angry? And lastly, how do I really feel about myself when I'm by myself? Now, once these questions start popping up into your awareness, you realize that being in your 30s and all this inward reflection can be really tough or even downright painful. And I think that's because this kind of reflection can make you feel like you're reconsidering everything that you thought you knew, or that you're like a child or a beginner again. And all at a time when you desperately want to feel like you finally have it all figured out, like you understand how the world works, like you're done with the stumbling and struggling phase of your life, and wondering if life would just be easier if you didn't ask these questions at all. But here are some reasons that I think that all of this inward contemplation in our 30s can be so important for our growth and expansion, and why we should embrace the decade. First is that there are a number of people in my life in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are married, they have kids, and working in high-paying careers that tell me things like, Brandon, don't be in a rush to get married, or I wish I would have waited a bit longer to have kids. They'll see me traveling to all these different places and tell me that they're living vicariously through me. They'll talk about how the level of stress at work is causing mental health issues, or they'll casually make jokes about how their evening glass of wine is their one little relief from living through yet another torturous Monday in their office cubicle. And so perhaps there's a special kind of sadness or emptiness that comes with living out of alignment with who you truly are, how you truly feel, or what you truly want. Next, I think that when you're living life according to what you should be doing, you tend to be surrounded by people that are doing the same. The idea of venturing out and exploring a life that is truly of your own imagination and design can seem a bit scary and lonely, but I think that once you start, you find that you begin attracting a different kind of person to your life. The kind of person that is also exploring a different path, that's also reflecting on who they've been and how they might want to show up differently. Basically, I think that once you start journeying inwards and becoming familiar with change and starting over, you begin attracting relationships that align with your values and thus feel deeper and more meaningful. Another reason that I think that we should embrace this decade of difficult self-reflection is because maybe, just maybe, doing so is one of the best ways that we can honor the generations before us. Think about it. Many of our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents sacrificed so much. They struggled to make ends meet, to escape a difficult life in their home country, or to go from a life of poverty to a life of relative comfort. And for what? Many of us feel that this is the very reason that we owe it to them to become doctors or lawyers. And maybe so. But also, perhaps they worked so hard so that their children could live a life based on fulfillment and not just survival. Maybe they lived a certain way because they had to, so that one day their children could live the way they want to. And lastly, consider this. If we can use our 30s to learn to be okay with starting over, of turning our focus inwards, of sitting with these difficult or uncomfortable questions, perhaps we can avoid the trap that so many of us have seen in those generations before us. The one that hardens, the one that becomes inflexible or uncreative, the one that convinces us that we already know everything despite a rapidly changing world around us. Maybe by learning to look more deeply into the mirror now, we can help ensure that we move forward in life with as much humility and openness as possible. No matter where we are, our 30s can be such a pivotal point in our lives. It's a decade of a lot of questions. It's a decade of a lot of change, a decade of deep reflection. But it's also a passage through which we sail from the idealism and perhaps naivety of our youth into the wisdom and maturity of our future. While the seas might be dark and stormy at times, perhaps if we can learn to embrace and follow our own inner compass, we can make our way towards a future that aligns with who we truly are. As the psychologist Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Thank you for watching, everyone. I put a lot of deep inner reflection into this video, and so if you got something out of it, it would mean the world to me if you liked the video and subscribed to my channel. And if you have any deep reflections of your own about being 30 or turning 30, then feel free to put them in the comments below and let me know what other videos you'd like to see next.